The sun was set as a sign for the awakening of men and the waning of elves, but the moon cherishes their memory. Hi, this is the Folksy Friend, and on this channel I like to talk about stories, in particular folk tales, beliefs, and mythologies. On Tuesdays we talk about Tolkien, and today is Tuesday. So let's go. Since its creation, the land of Valinor was lit by two trees, Laurelin and Telperion. These glorious trees had stood for many ages of peace in Aman, and were beloved by both the elves and the Valar that lived there. After the cruel plot of Morgoth, the great evil in the world, the trees are dead. The spider creature Ungoliant had drunk their sap and poisoned them, leaving nothing but withered branches and stems. The light had died, and the world was plunged into darkness. Now the Valar sat in their throne circle beside the dead trees. They had determined that it was impossible to bring the trees back to life, or to create the trees again. So Manwë commanded the two Valar that had created the trees to go and pour forth their power. Nienna and Yavanna went to the withered trees and poured all their magic into them. Nienna's tears could not heal them, and Yavanna sat for a long time singing and seeing no change. Just as hope began to fail on the lifeless branches, Telperion grew a single silver flower, and Laurelin a single golden fruit. Yavanna took them, and the trees finally died. Only their stems were left, and the stems were kept as a memorial. Manwë hollowed the flower and fruit, and Yavanna gave them to Aule. Aule and his smiths created vessels to protect them and preserve them. These vessels were then given to Varda, who gave them great power and light, so they would outshine the stars and be able to travel all the way around the world, from east to west, and even beneath it and back over again. As the Valar worked, they were thinking of all the things that Morgoth had done when he was still known as Melkor, the destruction of the lamps, the first lights of the world, and now the death of the trees. They were determined to create a way to light the world that Morgoth could not destroy. Not only did the Valar create the light to hinder him, they also did it to help the children of Iluvatar in Middle-earth. They thought of the elves who never made it to Valinor, and they still cared about the Noldor who were now in exile. Manwë also knew that the time of the second children was coming soon. The Hildor, men, were going to awake. Like the elves, the Valar had no idea where men would pop up in the world, so they created the light to be bright enough to cover the entire land. The vessel of the silver flower was named Isil. The Maya chosen to carry Isil was Tilion. He was a hunter of Orome who had a silver bow. He loved silver and would often rest in the gardens of Lorien by the pools of Este in the light of Telperion. He had begged to be allowed to carry Isil, the last ever silver flower. The vessel of golden fruit was named Anar. The Maya chosen to carry Anar was Erian. She was a spirit of fire, one that had not been corrupted by Melkor in the beginning. She had cared for the golden flowers in Vanna's gardens, and she was a mighty spirit, even more so than Tilion. She was chosen because she was not hurt by the heats of Laurelin. Her eyes were so bright that not even the Valar could look into them. When it came time to take Anar, she cast off her physical form, and she was as a naked flame, terrible in the fullness of her splendor. From this point forward, I will be referring to Isil and Anar as the moon and the sun. Tolkien tells us all the names that Isil and Anar were used by those in Valinor, while the Noldor named them Rana and Vasa. For the sake of simplicity and my own sanity, I will stick with sun and moon. The vessel of the moon was finished first, and it was decided that it would rise first. The moon went over the skies 7 times before the sun was complete. The first dawn of the sun was like a great fire upon the towers of the Pelori. The clouds of Middle-earth were kindled, and there was heard the sound of many waterfalls. Varda's original plan for the sun and moon was similar to the trees. They were both always shining over the world. They would travel from east to west, each starting on the opposite side of the world, so they met in the middle, which would then be the brightest part of the day.
This didn't quite work. Tilion, who held the moon, kept trying to come close to the sun, drawn in by her magnificence. And Lorien and Este complained to Varda that there was light constantly, so it was impossible to rest, and no one could see the stars. So Varda changed tactics. She had the sun rest in Valinor. The time that the sun came down from the skies to the outer sea was called evening, and it was the time of greatest light and joy in Valinor. Then the sun was drawn under the sea and across the underside of the world so it could rise again in the east. Varda told Tilion to do the same, rising only after the sun had set in the west. But Tilion was still drawn to the sun, so there were many times the sun and moon were seen in the sky at the same time. Sometimes he even got close enough to cause an eclipse. Other times he spent too long under the world, taking his time in the caves beneath the outer seas and taking a little too long to come back up and rise in the east. For this reason, the sun was chosen to mark the passing of each day because she was consistent, whereas the moon was not. And thus the years of the sun began.